Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is MC Brown. I am VP of Products here at Continuant. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. This is the second in our series of webinars on how our customers are using our technology in order to help support their software as a service deployment. This one happens to be on Adobe Sign. Before we get started, just a few little pieces of admin. The first thing I want to mention is that this webinar is being recorded. If you want to watch this webinar again, at the end of this presentation, or indeed you want to watch any of our webinars again, we have a whole variety of webinars here, both the first one obviously in this series, and we also have plenty on our technology and how it works and what it is capable of. You can go and view that all on our website. This one will be posted up shortly after this session. Additionally, I want to say that if you want to ask any questions at any time during this webinar, please feel free. There is a little section on your GoToWebinar section. You'll be able to ask questions there. If there is time at the end of this session, then I will hopefully answer the questions then. If we run out of time for any reason, then what will happen is we'll package up all of those questions and we'll put them up as a blog on our website immediately after this session. So with those two little pieces of admin out of the way, let's return to the webinar and get started. So as I mentioned, this is the second in our series of webinars on how our customers are using the Continuant technology, in particular our clustering technology, in order to support their software as a service options. And today we're going to have a look at Adobe Sign, and I'll talk a bit more about Adobe Sign and what they do, and indeed how they do what they do. And then ultimately, as we go through, we'll have a look at how our software ultimately supports that. Now, I think one of the key elements that we have to think about in this process, right, is that in order for modern companies, in order to support their customers, what we're finding, particularly from our side of the fence, is that we're seeing a lot of people realize that they need a reliable database and a reliable database infrastructure underneath their technology, and perhaps more important than that, they need something which is flexible and expandable, and which supports the new modern method of providing and supporting services, which is to go for this subscription model, right? We're now living in this environment where we are familiar with our subscription model of being able to apply for services, and this applies as much to company products as it does to personal ones. Obviously, we're all familiar with things like Amazon Prime or Netflix, where we can go along and subscribe to our services, and customers are providing those same services to businesses in terms of the way that they provide information. Again, you can see this in a variety of places. AWS, many of the cloud service, Azure, etc., work on the same model, right? You can book your computers, book your time, and your model through the system and on the basis of small little periods of time as you're going through. And it's also clear to us from the perspective of our customers and how our customers are operating that our customers are moving to this more subscription model, and they are moving much faster, right? It's a case now where you don't expect to install a database and maybe not change it or update it or modify it in any way, maybe for months or even years, which was the case even 5 years ago. Now people need to move into this subscription model, and they need to provide these services and provide them on to their customers as quickly as possible. And this means that there's a different way of providing and fulfilling this service, right? They need immediate fulfillment. They need to provide it anywhere, and they need to provide it in real time, and they need to provide it really quickly, and it needs to be really expandable. We have customers who maybe started with us a few years ago and kind of had one or two clusters, and they find now that they're up to 15, 20 clusters, and they're supporting that service, and they're realizing how critical it is that they get those up. And not only that, but they're also supporting their services and supporting their clusters, and they are expanding and improving, etc., all the time. Now, what that means is, we looked at this. We had a look at our 4 of our customers that provide software as a service style deployments. And what we wanted to do in this series is we wanted to show how our technology makes that possible for these customers, how these customers are able to do what they do by using our technology in the background. And we also wanted to demonstrate that it's actually not necessarily about the technology that is behind this, right? there is a whole business case behind why you want to be able to use these services and why you want to be able to make these services available through the technology that we provide. And that's because we want to show that we actually help your business. We help the function and the operation of your business by making it possible to do stuff and to provide services that ensure that your business is available and accessible. And again, going back to that subscription model, right? If you have a subscription model where you need someone who wants to be able to sign up to that service and sign up to that service very, very quickly, you need your service to be available all of the time, and you need to ensure that your service is accessible and available permanently, not only quickly, but also it's got to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also wanted to show how the flexibility and the functionality that we provide enables them to grow, because all of these customers are growing really quickly. Again, we have customers who have, installed one cluster and finally found, 6 months later that they're actually now installing 7. And they need to be able to do that, and they need to be able to do that quickly and efficiently. So in this series, we are looking here at, 4 different companies. We originally looked at Samson Arctic in our first one, who provide an Internet of Things style deployment. This one, we're having a look at Adobe Sign. In the future, we'll actually be having a look at Bluefin Payment Systems and New Voice Media. They all have slightly different use cases, slightly different business models, and indeed slightly different technology models for how they've used the software and how they've made it available. But at the end of the day, they're all making use of the same technology in order to achieve their business goals. So what we want to talk about, and what we will talk about and have talked about in this series, right? How we achieve things like revenue protection, how we enable revenue growth. That is the ability for these customers to expand their services and often expand their services very, very quickly, whilst also obviously providing a fantastic service onto their customers in order that they're able to achieve the growth and the business growth that they want, right? It's about how this information is distributed and how this information is made available to the customers. It's not just about the technology. It's all about the customer experience. Obviously, customers want to access these services, and they want to access them quickly, and they want to go through and they want to get the absolute best service for their systems and how it works. Right, so what we're going to do, right? We're going to start by having a look at Adobe Sign. And before we move on here, let me just explain what Adobe Sign is. Now, Adobe Sign is a service where, say, you've got a document, you've got a contract, and what you want to do is you want to be able to have this document signed by your customer. You want the customer to come in, you want them to be able to sign the contract, and you want to be able to send it back. Well, one way in which you could do that, obviously, is you could send them a paper copy. You could also send them a PDF copy and then have them print it out, sign it, and send it back, or even print it out, sign it, scan it in, and send the scanned in document back to you. What Adobe Sign does is it enables you to digitally sign and say, I have signed and agreed to this document, without anybody having to print anything out, without anybody having to scan anything back in, without having to mail anything. It is a purely digital system for accepting a contract or a document, signing it, confirming that it was definitely you and the recipient of the contract that ultimately signed it, and then sending it back, including adding a version of your signature on the document. And obviously, providing all of the information you would expect, date, time, etc., of when it was all signed and when it was all applied and connected to the system. So Adobe Sign, therefore, is a system of exchanging documents, and these documents can be around the world. I myself have signed documents and contracts from the US and from China through Adobe Sign. It is a very quick and efficient system, and obviously, it saves a lot of time all round for everybody. But that also introduces a number of issues from the perspective of what Adobe need to then provide onto their customers in order to make this possible, right? In order for me to be able to sign the document, somebody has to be able to submit it. I have to be able to access it, and it all has to be done very, very efficiently. And as we move more and more into this scenario of this digital-based signing, obviously the quantity of signed documents and the quantity of information that is being exchanged is constantly increasing all of the time. So the first thing I want to have a look at, right, is let's have a look at the revenue protection side. So by revenue protection, what we mean here is we mean the ability for our software in order to ensure that you're going to be able to continue accepting money from your customers in order to provide the service. Remember, back in that subscription model, right, we need customers to be able to take the data and then take the contracts rather, and then automatically sign them and then provide them back to Adobe. So that means it needs to be quick and fast and available. And an efficient method of providing that information. And the back end to that is obviously the database that provides the hooks for all of the information. There's the documents themselves that need to be signed, but then there's all of the data that goes along with that, who signed it when it was distributed, the email address, all of that information is all obviously held in a database. And that information needs to be available 24/7. I mean, I could be signing a document at 2 o'clock in the morning, or I could at least be signing a document at 2 o'clock in the morning as it is in the US. Because of the time that I've got up. It's not a question of, let's do it from 9 to 5. And the key thing for Adobe here is obviously they wanted to be able to provide continuous operation, and in particular, continuous operation for their database. So Tungsten Clustering provides this by providing a clustered solution that ensures that your database is available all of the time, right? We automatically handle failover. We automatically handle any problems. We automatically allow you to be able to perform maintenance and perform updates within your system without having to take your database down. So at no time over the course of a 24-hour period should you ever be in a position when your database is unavailable and where your data is therefore unavailable ultimately to your application. Now, the other thing that we do is we do this not only locally, but we will do this across different sites, right? So let's say that you have a site on the East Coast of the USA and you have a site in the West Coast of the USA. You want to be able to provide that level of failover. Let's say a site goes down, an operations center goes down, data center, et cetera, goes down. You want to be able to continue to provide that service in another place. And again, this is about continuous provision of the service and continuous availability of the database in order to make it and support it and allow it to work. And again, we support that, right? Both that you protected within the data center, but you're also protected across the data center because we allow this cross-site replication between different sites. Now, one of the other things that we provide is because we can be deployed in a variety of different environments, and that's something we'll actually have a look at in a future slide, because we can be available in a number of different environments, and because we're not tied to an individual source or service, we also have the flexibility to be able to do this in a way that means we are covered even if you're in a data center that would ordinarily have limitations. So obviously, let's have a look at AWS. Although it's obviously not unique in this respect. AWS, you have different regions, and within each region you have different availability zones. But we have the ability to run our clustering software on different servers within different availability zones, but still ultimately be part of the same cluster. And so you never have to worry about the fact that one AZ may go down. If one AZ goes down, it continues on the other two AZs and continues operating, and the cluster still is available and running. We also make sure that you can always transfer your service, right? Because we replicate the data, because we take very, 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 very good care of that data in the process, we can always guarantee that when we fail over, we've replicated rather the data over to the new system, so that when we switch over, there isn't a loss. There isn't a loss, and there isn't a loss window, and that happens even across different sites. And then the other thing, obviously, which I mentioned again earlier, all of this functionality, which I've mentioned so far, is about failover in the event of a problem. Obviously, there are other scenarios where you want to be able to switch and control your system. And what we do there is we enable you to take down a system, take down an individual database, or take down an individual service, perform whatever maintenance you need to do, and then bring it back up and bring it back into the cluster. So that means if you have to do a configuration change or a hardware change, or you have to change the size of the instance, or even if you have to perform database operations, such as schema changes or software upgrades, into the system in order to accommodate your new application, we allow you to do that because we can take single nodes out of the cluster while allowing the rest of the cluster to operate and then bring them back in, and you can upgrade and migrate your service that way. Ultimately, we also provide an absolutely excellent service, and we'll have a look at that later. But our support is something that all of our customers think is absolutely amazing. Now, here's the other side, right? So that was our revenue protection. We can guarantee that your service will be available, and we can guarantee that your database will be available in order to back up your application. The other aspect which is important is the revenue upside. That is our ability in order to help you make money by allowing you to expand as quickly and as efficiently as you possibly can. And we actually do that with a number of different methods. One of the key methods that our customers use, which is actually not necessarily a function of the cluster, but is a function of the way that our clusters are able to be deployed, is that it's possible for you to shard and separate your data out into individual pods. And this kind of pod architecture is something that many of our customers are using, right, where you have a single shard and a single group of customers are using this shard of your overall data set. And within that overall data set, within that shard, obviously a customer comes in, they get redirected to a particular database cluster in order for their operation to work, and they're now dedicated to that. This is not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination, but the ability to support that within a cluster basis and still have all of the functionality. You are not tied to obviously combining those two systems together into a single operation. It's not part of the clustering. It's not a single part of the overall solution. So you can deploy a shard-based architecture with our clustering solution without worrying about having to manage that shard-based system beyond dedicating your customer to a particular shard. And the other thing that we do is that it means that we're much more able to obviously help you expand your service. You want to provide and support more customers, create more pods, create more shards, create more of these individual clusters serving an individual cluster group of customers. And our clustering software is very, very quick and easy. I mean, apart from obviously standing up the servers in order to do it, we can get you a new cluster installed within minutes and it's up and running. And that's, again, obviously really, really important for these customers who want to be able to expand, improve their service and make it more available. Now, all of that functionality and that ability to be able to stand up your clusters very, very easily, and then our ability to be able to replicate data between different sites also means we can take advantage of our replication within different sites in order to make it much more easy for your data to be accessible within different regions. And this covers a couple of different points. One is just localized data within a particular region. Right, if I happen to be a US customer, let's have a look at a database side. I'm a US customer. I want a document signed by someone in India. I want to be able to submit the document into the system and get it signed. And I want to be able to do that quickly and efficiently. And that means that the most efficient way of me doing that is obviously to talk to application servers in the US, and those application servers obviously talk to database servers within the US. When the customer in India gets that and they want to be able to sign it, the same is true, right? They want to be able to do it as quickly and efficiently as possible. And so you want to be able to have database servers in India that are supporting the application servers in India in order to support that functionality. Because we allow cross-site replication, we can do that. And so you can get that data between those different locations. So localized services get very, very quick access. So you get a much better customer experience because the customer isn't waiting, for the return trip time between different databases in different regions. And you get the information much, much quicker. The other thing that you're able to do is in different countries around the world, obviously the issue of data sovereignty is really, really important for some countries and some governments and regulations. For example, let's have a look at GDPR that is coming in Europe at the moment. You need to be able to say that your data is stored in a particular place. Now, you might replicate that data somewhere else, but ultimately you want to be able to say that your data is located in a particular country so that you can say that data has sovereignty within a particular state. Again, We support that option because we can have your cluster in a specific country or a specific region, and then also replicate that data out to wherever it's needed across the world as is required. In Adobe's case, and again, we'll have a look at one of Adobe's deployments. One of Adobe's shards is actually distributed right across the world, and we'll see that in a minute. But Adobe actually use 6 shards, and those 6 shards, the clusters within those shards are obviously distributed around the world in different places according to those customers and how that data needs to be localized and how that data sovereignty needs to be handled. Now, another aspect which I think is important is actually the cost of the service. Now, if you're providing a subscription service, you obviously want to be able to control your database service and obviously control the costs of your database service. And there are many aspects to that. It's not only about the software cost, it's also about how you deploy it and where you deploy it. So the Tungsten clustering software is completely agnostic about where you want to run it. Right? If you want to run it on bare metal, you can do so. If you want to be able to run it in a virtualized environment, VMware, whatever, in a data center, you can do that. You want to run that in AWS, you can do that. You want to do it in Azure, you can do that. Right? Rackspace, you can do that. Not only can you do that, you can actually do combinations of that. So this means that you can take advantage of the best, lowest cost service in order to support your operation in whatever region is available, right? So that means, if you happen to have a very, very big installation of AWS servers in the US and you get a particularly good service there, and maybe you get a discount because of the quantity of AWS servers you're using just generally, then go ahead and use AWS in the US. But if you find out that AWS is expensive as a region option in Australia or Europe, and maybe you find out that Rackspace is cheaper, you can go ahead and do that. And if you want to replicate the data between those, again, you can do that, right? You're not married to having to use a particular database as a service option. That would then be different costs in different countries and potentially different prices and their different return on investment. And that means you can choose where you want to be able to run your system, and you can choose where is the lowest cost option, the most inexpensive option in order for us to be able to accept and take on that work and that operation. So Adobe, as it happens, they use AWS throughout their systems, but we do have customers who also take advantage of being able to use this different. And sometimes that's for lower cost. Sometimes that's because they want to have a backup in case Amazon goes down, or Rackspace goes down, or their data center, whatever, goes offline, right? So in that case, obviously they're running one service within, say, AWS, and a backup service is being run in their own data center or on bare metal, whatever is required in order to support those options. Now, the last one that I want to talk about, which is directly related to the technology, is ultimately we have a complete solution, right? So what you tend to find with a lot of database as a service options, and indeed a lot of general database clustering options in the MySQL world, is what you find is you get some parts of the components, but not all of them, and you end up having to glue different parts together. So you might get the database, and you might get a management operation, and you might get something that handles failover. Maybe you have the support of something like DRBD, in order to support a DR style service for the overall operation. What you don't get is you don't then get a management tool that handles what happens in front of that. You then have to install, your own proxy service, your own solution in order to be able to sit in front of that, so you don't get affected by the problems when something happens. That is not the case with Tungsten clustering, right? We offer a complete solution. We offer a solution that manages the underlying MySQL database, manages the overall process, it handles automatic failover, handles failover between sites, handles all of the management and operation, provides all of that, all of the monitoring and information you need, and provides then a connector in front of all of that that sits there and completely hides that complex database infrastructure from your applications. And most of the time, your applications never know. It's not something that we mentioned on this slide, right? But the fundamental principle of the way that our tungsten clustering software works is that with the connector, you never need to change your application. No changes to your application are ever required. You install our software, your applications think they're talking to a database, even though there's a cluster behind it. And the manager and particularly the connector that sits in front of that provides a complete abstraction layer for what is going on underneath. And any of the changes that happen within the cluster, failover, failure of a node, change of a master, all of that functionality is all hidden because there's a connector in front of it that's hiding all of that. And that means that you've got a complete solution, right? You can install our cluster and not have to worry about whether I've got to glue or plug in some other piece, and whether I've now separately got to manage a management system or a proxying system or monitor it in some different way. All of the information is available and there, right? We're application agnostic. We don't care what your application is. We don't care what functionality, programming language, you name it, is used. Providing obviously it wants to access MySQL at the back end. And we're also platform agnostic, right? If you want to run on Ubuntu or Debian or Red Hat, any of those systems, we also don't care. And that means that there's no customer integration required. And again, this goes back to other elements like, lower cost and much better overall service from the product. Now, the last item is something that I touched on earlier. Customer service is one of the items that we pride ourselves on, right? So we provide 24/7 customer support. We have a team of very, very experienced support engineers. Most of the people working for us in our support department have more than 10 years, and in many cases more than 15, and in some cases more than 25 years of experience in this world in terms of their database and their expertise. At an average, we are over 15 years in terms of being able to provide this level of experience. We also pride ourselves on the speed at which we respond to cases. Our average response time for a support query when it comes in is less than 5 minutes. That's even for non-urgent queries, right? So if you have an issue on your system and you want to make it, you've got a question, you have some issue, we would generally get back to you very, very quickly in order to solve it. And if it's something that requires a phone call and us watching over your shoulder while we help you sort out the problem, we'll be on there with a phone call within minutes if necessary. We also, perhaps more importantly, in terms of the actual software itself, the software itself is very, very reliable. We don't have a lot of problems or complaints about the software, how it operates. And that means that for some of our customers, their uptime is measured in months and indeed in some cases years. I think we have one customer and they've been running for 2 years and 9 months or something at this point, never with an overall database outage. They might have had a single failure in one of the nodes or something, but the cluster has handled that and they've been able to provide that continuous operation. That's partly backed up by our software, partly obviously backed up by our support and our operation. Now, so let's return to Adobe Sign and let's just actually see how in particular they operate, right? So from a perspective of how Adobe Sign have deployed their systems, basically they have multiple regions for all of their shards, and they have then have a cluster obviously within each region, and they do that for reasons of local performance as well as data sovereignty and obviously failover and ability. Their largest shard, that is the one with the largest amount of data, which has about 7 terabytes of information being managed. So that one shard had 2 clusters in the USA, one in US East, one in US West. And then they also have clusters that are available in Europe, Japan, Australia, and India. And in each of those situations, they are running what we call our composite cluster. Now, our composite cluster is 2 clusters. So one cluster which is our active, and the other one which is your passive, which is there for your failover. So you have one active cluster and one passive cluster. The data is always being replicated from the active to the passive. In the event of a failure within a single cluster, obviously we handle that process, take the node out of operation, make you aware of that situation. In the event of a complete cluster failure, or indeed a failure within the environment in which that cluster is running, we switch over to the backup cluster entirely. It's already got a copy of all of the data because we've been replicating that live in the background. And the way that Adobe Sign have done that is they organize their clusters so that they are each of those nodes is within its own availability zone within a particular region within AWS. And then they also split that. So, for example, they have US East primary is in US East 1, whereas the secondary there is in US West 2. So in the event of a failover, they're not even going to the same specific region within AWS. It's not even US East 1 to US West 1. Now, again, I want to stress, we offer a complete solution. The connector in this case is handling all of the abstraction. If anything goes wrong within a single environment, within that primary, the connector will handle the redirection to the other data center and will handle. And again, your applications will be unaware of the fact that they're now talking to a completely different data center in order to handle that. And there's also a single management layer for this process, right? If you want to switch between the two clusters, you go in and use our management tool and go in and handle that. You don't have to configure multiple different systems in order to be able to handle that. A very, very simple and straightforward. So how does this obviously look? Right. Well, so I think it's always worth trying to compare it to a typical scalable database architecture solution, and Amazon RDS is often the one that's quoted. There are a number of different problems and issues with Amazon RDS, not least of which is actually very limited in the way that it operates. RDS operates within a single geographical region, and your failover within a single geographical region. So if your region goes down, even if it's a different availability zone, and regions have gone down in AWS, you've lost your database entirely. There is also no resilience within that system. Although the RDS service may have resilience, you actually don't get any cross region resilience, and you certainly get no automatic management. You can add a connector, you can add a proxying layer on top of that, but ultimately that's again something that you then have to handle yourself rather than something that is automatically handled by the system. Overall, you also get very, very much slower performance. RDS is not the fastest system in the world in terms of that. It's also very, very complex to manage because there are so many moving pieces. There's RDS, your proxying service, how you actually ultimately manage that. Going in and be able to go and say, switch over because of a failure, etc. It all takes time. Even a switch within Amazon RDS can take some time. For us, we can usually switch, generally within a few seconds. Depends on the environment and the data volumes being used, but generally within a few seconds. Sometimes RDS doesn't even notice that it needs to switch over for a minute, and sometimes it can take up to 5 minutes for a switch over to happen. That is outage time you cannot afford if you're in a situation of trying to provide software as a service, trying to provide your subscription service onto your customers. By comparison, Tungsten clustering. Right, we're continuing. You get multi-region support with any AWS or indeed any other cloud environment and bare metal data center. Cross-region replication, cross-region failover, cross availability zone failover. Right, consistent performance. You know how fast the system is going to operate because you can monitor or watch that, and it's going to be consistent no matter how many clusters you install and how many different places you install it. Very, very scalable. Add more clusters or even add more nodes if you want to try and improve performance. But because you can add more clusters and add more pods and more shards into that process, it's infinitely scalable in order to how you handle it. And then obviously automated failover, automated recovery should anything go wrong. So ultimately, what did that mean for Adobe Sign, right? So increased revenue protection. They know that their service is going to be up and running. They know that it's going to be available. They know that they're not going to have any downtime when dealing with their customers. They have full data sovereignty. They've got the ability to support their data in different regions and say, this is where our data lives, and the ability to replicate it somewhere else in order to make best available performance. Increased revenue because of that localized performance, better customer experience. Better customer experience goes a long way in order to ensuring overall a better service. The connector provides that required abstraction, and that's one of the key points that Adobe have raised with us actually, is how great that connector is in terms of obviously providing a complete abstraction layer for their database, so that their applications honestly don't know what's going on underneath, and their applications don't need to know. Your application shouldn't need to know what's going on with the database underneath. Overall lower cost because they can optimize where they run it. And the customer service, obviously, as I've spoken about, provides peace of mind. They know that if there's ever any issue, they can phone us or log a support request. So there we go. That was a quick overview of what we've done, and indeed how we have specifically helped Adobe Sign in their deployment. I didn't want to detail too much on the technical aspects of how everything works. If you want to go and have a look at that, please go and have a look at our webinars. Our past webinars, have a look at how our technology works and operates. The key thing to take away from this webinar, and indeed this whole series of webinars, right, is that with the tungsten clustering, we offer revenue protection, revenue upside. That is the ability to improve and expand your revenue or your income. Lower cost because you get the ability to choose where you're going to be able to run it. You get a complete solution. You're not having to do any level of customer integration or customization in order to work it into your system. And ultimately, you get stellar customer support. And if there is one thing that all of our customers agree on without fail, it's that the quality of the customer support is outstanding. Now, that ends this webinar and this look in particular at Adobe Sign. Obviously, we have two more in this series to go. We have Bluefin and New Voice Media, which will be coming in the coming weeks. We had a brief hiatus while we released some new software. If you want any more information, you want to get in touch, please go ahead, go and view our website. Go and read our white papers, go and have a look at the documentation, our training and our webinar library. If you want to get in touch, you want to ask any questions, and we're always open to any questions you want to ask at any time. Please get in touch with us with sales@continuent.com. We're happy to answer any questions, set up a demo of the software or a proof of concept with your solution if that's what you want to do. You can also contact any of us direct. You can see my email address is on there. My name, again, is MC Brown. Any of these people will be able to help you in various parts of the world. They are, again, all willing to answer questions if you've got any. So that's the end of the webinar. I am, in fact, slightly over time, so we will skip any questions that have come in, but we will answer those questions in a follow-up blog after this webinar is finished. I hope you found this webinar useful and you found the information useful in understanding what we offer and what we offer to our customers and our customer support in their software as a service options. Please come and view the webinars, the upcoming webinars on the other companies, and indeed any of our future webinars. Thank you very much.